Okay, guys. So today we are going to start the new unit, which is on methods. Now, essentially, the purpose of this unit is explaining how to use a method effectively and what they do. Now, I've mentioned methods before. Perhaps you may have noticed when I talked about the main method, which is really the only method that we have worked on so far in the course. Now, a method is essentially a section of code which accomplishes a certain task. Now, the main method, which you have been working on so far in the course, is contained within this green square that I have drawn on the screen. Now, the main method, obviously, is defined by keyword main, and this starting statement, public static void main, will always be in your code once you open up a new program. And up until now, all of your code has been contained within the main method. The main method is contained within these two brackets, which are highlighted in yellow. Now, the main method is where your program starts running. The moment you press this play button at the top of the screen, it's going to enter the main method and it's going to run this line of code right here, the printout statement for calling all methods. We are going to be creating more methods on top of the main method. Okay, so essentially how this is going to work is we have this black box right here, which represents the main method. And as I have already explained, this is where your code is going to start. Okay. And it's going to run through your code one line at a time. Now, what you can actually do is you can create a second box, as we'll call it, for a unique method. So the idea is that you might have a section of code which accomplishes a specific task. For example, you might create a section of code which effectively calculates the average, the mark average of a certain class. Now, this may be 10 lines of code long, but again, it all relates to the same idea, which is we're going to calculate the average of this class. Now, in order to organize your program, instead of taking these 10 lines of code and placing them within your main method like you normally would do, we're going to pack them up and we're going to put them in a separate unique method away from our main. Okay, and it serves two purposes. The first code that relates to a specific idea or task. The idea is this accomplishes two things. One is that it organizes your code so that each method will have its own task. And once your code gets to hundreds and hundreds and thousands of lines long, it's easy to tell what's going on where because not all of your code is plopped within the main method. And two, you can reuse code a lot easier and you can make efficient programs when you use methods. And that might make a lot of sense right now, but once you start using methods and getting into more complex programs, you're going to realize that you could not have accomplished this without methods. So for now, it's fine if you literally only think of methods as a way of organizing your code to take certain ideas and separate them into different methods so your code is easier to read, but you will find that it has much, much more uses. So the idea is that let's say this unique method had the purpose of calculating an average. Okay, you might want to call it, why can't I edit this? There we go. You might want to call this something like calc average. Okay, you're going to want to name your unique method something relevant to what they do. Okay, so place code in here that calculates class average. Okay, now what's going to happen is if I was to run this hypothetical code that I have here in my two boxes, I would have code introducing the program, blah, blah, blah. And then what I would do is I would call upon my calc average method with a line of code that looks something like this, simply restating the name of the method, the unique method which I created. And what's going to happen when I do this within my main is it is going to jump down to my calculate average method. It is going to run through all of the code in my calculate average method, and then it is going to go back to the next line of code in my main. So each time that I call upon a specific method from my main, I go down to that method, I run all of the code in that method, and then I come back to my main and I keep running it. And the really useful thing is I can call upon this unique method as many times as I want. So if I have this one chunk of code that calculates an average, I can call upon this same method with one line of code, calc average with 2 empty brackets. I can call upon this method as many times as I want, and I can just keep using that code and I never have to rewrite it. So again, the two ideas of why methods are useful is because they can take chunks of code and place them aside so that your code is more organized, your program is more organized, and it allows you to reuse code because anytime you want to access that method with all of that code, you just need to write one simple line command, which is the name of that method, and it will run the entire method just like that. And you only have to write that code once. Okay? So that's the idea. Let's actually look at how it appears within our code. So as you can see, um, let me try getting all this on the screen at once. All right, so as you can see, I have my main method right here, okay? Now, my main method is pretty straightforward, all right? I have a printout statement that says calling all methods, and then what happens is I call upon a method called asterisks. Okay, notice I have the name of the method followed by 2 empty parentheses. That's me calling upon the method. So at this point, I'm going to take a break from my main method and I'm going to jump down to a unique method called asterisks. If you scroll down in my code, you will see that after the main ends, again, the main ends once this open bracket from the start of my main connects with the closed bracket, both highlighted in yellow. Once my main ends, I have a second method. Okay, I'm just going to erase this comment so that it can fit onto my screen a little bit easier. Okay, so I have a unique method that I called asterisks. Now there's a lot of new code here. All right, and I'm going to get into what all this means in a second, but this line of code right here starts a unique method, which I have named asterisks. Now, in this unique method, I have quite simply a for loop that runs 20 times. And for each iteration of this for loop, I'm going to print out an asterisk. So it's going to print out 20 asterisks all on the same line because I'm using print, not print line. And at the end of it, I'm going to jump down to the next line. So essentially, the point of this method is that it's going to print 20 asterisks. And every time I access this method, I'm going to print 20 asterisks. Now, when I call upon the method by stating the name within anywhere in my code, once I state this name, I will go to it. I state the name of the method with 2 empty parentheses. I'm going to jump from my main down to my asterisk method. Okay, and I'm going to print out 20 asterisks. And then after that, I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to continue with my main. Okay, I'm going to print out great job method. Okay, I'm back. I've returned from my method. And then notice that I call upon the exact same method again with the exact same line of code down here. At which point, again, I'm going to leave my main. I'm going to go to my unique method, print out 20 asterisks, and then I'm going to come back and continue with my code. Okay, so in essence, what's happening is I'm going to print out calling all methods. I'm going to print out 20 asterisks using my method, invoking, we say the keyword is invoking the method. And then I'm going to print out great job method, 20 more asterisks, and we're out of here. So let's actually run this to see what it looks like. Okay, so within my main, calling all methods, and then I invoke the method, go in, print out 20 asterisks, come back. Within my main, I wrote right here, great job method. Oops, let me lock this. Okay, over here, I print out great job method. And then I call upon my method again, which prints out 20 more asterisks, as you can see in both the highlights. And then I come back to my main and I print out we're out of here, which appears there in my output. So I jump from my main to asterisks to main to asterisks to main. Okay. So a couple things that need to be noted of. First of all, please make sure that whenever you create a unique method, you're doing it outside of the main. The main is its own method, and you cannot place a method inside of another. Okay, so my main starts here at this open bracket, it ends here at this closed bracket. And then after that, I can start my second method. Okay, my second method asterisks starts at this open bracket and ends at this closed bracket. Whenever you create a unique method, it starts with keyword public static void. Okay, keyword public and keyword static need to be there, but we're not going to really touch upon what those words mean, and we're not going to alter them until we get into the grade 12 course. So for now, all that you need to know is when you create a new method, public static void. Now, keyword void, I will teach you what that means and how to alter it in future lessons. But one more time for now, every method is going to start with public static void, and then you are going to follow it with however you want to name your method. Okay, I chose to call this method asterisks because, well, it prints out asterisks. And your method needs to be camel case, just like your variables. So if you named it asterisk with a capital A, I would take off a mark for form because it needs to be camel case. And again, camel case is when the first word starts with a lowercase and every consequent word starts with an uppercase letter. Okay. After you create the name for your method, you will follow it by 2 empty parentheses and then an open bracket to start. So right now for this lesson, everything is going to be cookie cutter, public static void, name, parentheses, open curly bracket. The only thing that you will change for now is what I've highlighted here, which is the name of your method. Okay, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it my method, but I wouldn't do that because, well, it's not relevant to the purpose of the method. But keep in mind that whatever you call your method, you're going to have to keep repeating that every time you want to call upon it. So if I wanted to call upon my method, I would have to express that over here. Okay, and obviously this would accomplish the exact same thing. Form. Each of your method needs a documentation header, just like the start of your program needs a documentation header. Okay, now documentation header again begins with slash asterisk asterisk and then an asterisk on every single line. But as you jump down to the next line, it should automatically put an asterisk there for you. Your method header should only contain the name of the method as well as a short description of what the method does. You don't need to include your name or a date because that is already at the top of your program. Now, all of your methods should be contained within your class. So if we look at the top of this program, you have 3 lines of code which have always been there and you may not have paid too much attention to them. The first line is the package, the second line is the class, and the third line is the main method. You know a little bit more about the main method now. The main method is going to be the method where your program starts always. And then you can jump to different unique methods as you move along. Now, all of your methods should be contained within the class. Okay, so as you can see, my display class, which is the name of my project, starts at this bracket right here, which is highlighted in yellow. And if I keep my cursor there, it will also highlight the end bracket in yellow. So if I scroll down, you will see that the end bracket for my class is the end of my program. So always your class should be the first bracket and the last bracket in your program, which also insinuates that all of your methods should be contained within your class. Okay, so That's the basics of methods. Now, I'm going to build upon this and introduce new ideas. But again, the basic idea is that you are using a method to take lines of code, and if all of this code has to do with a certain idea or task, you're going to pack it up in a method, place it aside. This is going to organize your code, and you can call upon it as many times as you want, reusing that code. Because again, if you're ever writing the same line of code more than once, there's probably a better way that you could be doing it. One more brief note, you'll notice here that for my for loop, I do not have curly brackets as you might use, which looks something like this. Just to reiterate, you do not need curly brackets if the chunk of code is one line long. So if I take out these curly brackets, it's just going to assume that my for loop only has one line of code in it, which is correct. If I was to have more than one line of code, I would have to include those curly brackets for the chunk of code, which is my for loop. Now I'm going to give you a more complicated example of how you might use these basic methods until we get into more complicated methods. Over here, I have a program which you guys have seen before. This program is for the shopping mall, or Willy Wonka's chocolate shop, sorry. I created this program before, but I didn't use methods. You have $20 to spend. What would you like to buy? You can buy the chocolate bar for $6.99, candy pack for $4.50, or candy strings for $3. Your current bill costs $0. What would you like to purchase? Okay, candy bar, candy pack, candy bar, candy pack. But I cannot afford a candy pack because I already spent $18, so you cannot afford that. It's time to leave. Now we can take this program and we can separate it into two main ideas. One is the code that I use to print out this introduction, and two, the code which takes me through the process of purchasing items and calculating the bill. And that's exactly what I do with my methods. Okay. Notice here that my main method is very short. A proper and organized program will have a very simple main method because the purpose is that anybody could come into my program, look at my main method, and they could realize right away what's going on. There's two sections to this program. The first section is the menu. The second section is we're going to buy stuff. And I don't need to place all of my code in the main because that can get confusing. Right now, I can just see the titles of all of my tasks, which makes it so much easier to work with, both for person coding and anybody else who comes in and looks at your code. Because if you guys go into industry, you're not going to be the only one working at your code. You're going to be working in small groups of people who are all working on the same code and collaborating. That's why Java, among with all the other programming languages, are what we call modular, because you're going to take the code and you're going to separate it into smaller tasks. And if you do it in an organized fashion such as this, then it's going to be a lot easier to work with other people. Anyways, point is, your main should be simple. A proper main will have basic printout statements and just calls upon other methods. It's like your home screen, your hub. It's just redirecting you to different methods. Now, I have my menu method, which I call upon first, which is going to jump back down to here, where I have my unique method menu. Again, public static void, name of the method, which is menu, two empty parentheses, and the open curly bracket. This just prints out my menu screen. Welcome to Willy Wonka's. Here's the menu. You have $20, blah, 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 blah. I do have my documentation header here with the name of the method and a brief description. Okay. And after I print out the menu, I jump back up here and I call upon, or rather I invoke the buy stuff method. So I'm going to go down, look for my buy stuff method. Yep. Oops. Sorry. Yep. Here's my buy stuff method. I create my scanner. Okay. I create my cost, which starts at 0. And I have my choice, which is going to be 1, 2, or 3. I have a while loop, which repeats as long as the amount of money I spend is less than $20, or I keep letting them choose 1, 2, or 3, or the cost is going to increase by the respective amount. Once I'm done this while loop, once they've spent more than $20, I will simply print out, you cannot afford that, it's time to leave. Now notice that I declared all of my variables and even my scanner within this buy stuff method. An important factor that you need to realize is that any, let's say I created all of these variables within my main method, scan and cost and choice, three variables which were very important to my buy stuff method. If I create them within my main method, you'll see I have a whole bunch of errors appearing in my buy stuff method. If I look at cost and I hover over the error, you might not be able to read that, but it says cannot find variable cost. What it's telling you is this variable does not exist. You did not create it. Now, we probably talked about scope earlier in this course. The scope of a variable is where it exists in your code. You can't just create a variable such as cost and expect to be able to use it everywhere. Okay, so in addition to what I've already taught you about scope, the scope of a variable is within its own method. So if I create cost in my main, that variable does not exist within any of these methods. I would have to recreate it within those methods because those methods are self-contained. And that is why if you want to use, and this is what you need to take away from scope, if you want to use any variables within a method, you need to create them. You need to declare them in the same method. Okay, now that I have put my declarations back within the method, I can use all of those variables because they exist within that method now. Okay, just to show you one more example, if I create an integer called variable in my main method, that's all fine and dandy. But if I want to, let's say, print out that variable, I can't do that here. I can't print out that variable in menu because this variable does not exist in the method. It only exists within main. It only exists between these two brackets. And likewise for my methods, any variables that I create within menu only exist within that menu method. Oops. Any variables that I create within buy stuff, which is a lot. I have my scan and variable, my cost variable, my choice variable, that only exists within buy stuff. And that's okay because notice that all those printout statements, those all happen within the method. Okay. So one last example. At the end of this method, which calculates what you can buy, we have the cost variable, which represents how large your bill is. Because your bill isn't always going to be exactly $20. It just can't exceed $20. So you might want to print something out that says your final bill is plus whatever the cost is, right? Let's run this one more time. Take a look-see. What would you like to purchase? I'm just going to keep purchasing candy bars. Okay, so obviously a small error is that it lets me exceed my bill of $20, but we're going to ignore that. I can debug that later. But point is that your final bill is $20.97, which again, we're going to ignore the fact that it goes above $20. And I can do that because I can print out the cost because it exists within the method and I am in the method. If I try to take this statement and put it over here after buy stuff, because this makes sense. First I go to the menu, then I buy stuff, and then I'm going to print out my current bill, which I calculated as cost. I can't do that because the variable cost only exists within that method. So to summarize everything I've been trying to explain in the past 5 minutes, is that any variable you create within a method, a main method or a unique method, has to be contained within that method. You can't access it outside of it. Now, there are ways around this problem, which I will teach you in future lessons. But for now, it has to stay within that method. You can't access it outside of it. Okay? So that's pretty much everything we needed to go over today. Let me know if you have any questions and make sure that you're completing your homework.